exhausted their immediate number. Now to the next matter of urgency.
What is going on, guys? It's TheAireaidLord. This is the Writer's Block. This is episode 3, and you are listening to your two co-hosts, TheAireaidLord, or Chris, and also P-Dog, or Pete. And
hello
today,
there.
Yes. And today, we will be talking about plot. This is episode 3, and the theme of this episode is anything and everything to do with the plot of a creative story. Last episode, we talked about the ins and outs of writing, the specific kinds of writing that people undertake, specifically, the script writing and novel writing. We went through all the different kinds. We talked about which ones meant a lot to us, and we also posed a challenge to each other that we would both write a story based on our works that was in the opposite form of writing that we chose. So Pete has to do a story in novel form. I have to do it in a script, like screenplay kind of form. So that'll be for a future episode, but in that, just wanted to recap a little bit and give you guys a bit of a summary in case you missed the last episode. I put all these episodes in a playlist on my YouTube channel, TheAireaidLord, so if you miss any of the episodes, you can always check it in the Writer's Block playlist. The image is always updated thanks to P-Dog. And,
Did you make that little updated tab on your website?
Thank you for reminding me about that. That I did forget. It's been a while since I've been on TheAireaidLord.com. I will, if I can get that tab. It's been a while since I've edited my website, so if I can get on my website and edit that tab, there will be, on TheAireaidLord.com, there will be a tab which will link all of the Writer's Block episodes that are live on YouTube. Okay? So, plot of the story. Basically what we're going to do with the plot is we're going to run through the things that we enjoy in a plot, what part of the plot we enjoy the most, and also examples that we see in films, movie, TV, books, anything really.
Video game?
Video games, yes. We are gamers. As many of my fans probably know, I am a gamer. It's what my channel revolved around for the most part until I jumped into this podcast. But any form of entertainment, whether it's electronic or in written form, in paper, we're going to give our perspectives on what we found to be the greatest plot elements from those works, and we'll also be talking about what elements we see in our own works which really excel, and for you who are writing for the first time, we'll give you some basic tips on how to foresee the plot of your story. So I'll let Pete give us a scenario and we can get started.
Well, to talk about a plot in general, first of all, a plot is basically the story or the narrative of whatever creative writing piece you're doing, because you need a plot for anything that you do, obviously, because if you don't have a plot, then what are you going to write about? Because if it's going to be a non-factual book and it's going to be fictional, you're going to be the one that creates this entire story, and it can seem like a daunting task to new coming writers, where they're like, oh, I've got to create this whole story and stuff. But to other people, it could be like a great accomplishment for them. Like they could be like, oh, I can't wait to write about whatever I was doing. So like we were saying last episode about what hobbies and stuff you had, and you mentioned about the 10 facts about you that you know to be true, and then you write about one of those. Well, now you can create like characters and create the scenarios these characters get up to. We're going to explain some terminology as to how to describe like each of the characters, but then that'll be more like, it's going to be more in a plot base. It's not going to be more of like detailed character like summaries like we're going to do for the next episode. But instead, we're going to be doing it in terms of like a narrative form and how each character should implement into the plot and how much screen time or how much time you write about them in your chosen written text. So, to have a plot is normally split into several different like iterations, but for most people, there's 3 basic cuts in it. There's the intro, the main body, and the ending. Now, we're going to go into more detail about what goes into all 3 of these and which one is our personal favorites, but I guess that's what you would get for plot. And like sometimes people, it depends on like the kind of writer, but sometimes they might write about like they might have different ways of writing something. They might start off with writing a plot, then integrate the characters, and they might start off with characters and build scenarios and stuff. So I'm going to ask Chris, whenever you're writing, I think you've written a book. I'm not too sure. Have you? I don't really know. But
Oh, no,
I think you've written a book or whatever.
Only sold
and so,
about 100 copies.
yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
so I mean, yeah, self-published, whatever. But what did you start off with when creating the orb? Did you start off with a story, or did you start off with going for like other factors, like characters or setting, and then did you warp around it to create some story for it?
It's a good question. I talked a little bit about this in episode 1, where basically, as I said, my series of books for the Noah Jefferson series started as a writing prompt that I received in 6th grade. We watched a really shitty movie, Journey to the Center of the Earth. It was like a 1950s movie, and we had to write a creative story using scientific terms. And I decided to, instead of guys going to the center of the Earth and finding rocks, they actually find aliens. And in that case, that was where the plot came first, because the assignment I was given was plot-driven. The teacher said, okay, here's this scenario, which was, a plot scenario. These guys do this. Make an interesting twist to it, and write a story about it. So the assignment that I was given was plot-driven. And most of my thoughts going forward were always about the plot, how my story could be formed from the plot. So basically, okay, so they see these aliens. What are they going to do when they actually see the aliens for the first time? Are they going to go to their home planet? Are they going to freak out because, there's extraterrestrial beings? Which way could this go? And the way I went when I first wrote the first book, which actually wasn't called The Orb, it was The Encounter. It was a totally different story. And when I did it, I basically had it so that the way it went was that it was more of a casual kind of tone when I took it with the characters. Like, the main characters were not freaked out about the aliens because these characters were from a scientific company. I forget what I called the company in the first draft, but they were a research-based company for science anyway. Like, their whole purpose was to mine rocks in the cave anyway. So when they found the aliens, they're like, this is right up our alley. And so basically, they saw the aliens, and the aliens are, like, really friendly. They're like, hello, here's our civilization, we've been waiting to see you. And again, since I was 12 when I wrote it, it kind of seemed weird, like, oh, all of a sudden these aliens are just so friendly, and all of a sudden they give them a map, and they want the humans to see them. It did seem kind of weird, and especially the first draft of my encounter story definitely, suffered a little bit, but that's understandable since A, I was 12 years old when I wrote it, and B, the story was fairly short. I have it in a folder in my drawer, and it is a fairly short story, and it doesn't really emphasize more of the plot. But when I started for the first time, it was all mainly plot-driven, and the characters started to come into play later on, and we will have an episode in the future dedicated entirely to characters and settings in the future, but if I could briefly talk with my characters, I mainly took them from either names that I liked or people that I had known. So the main character of the book was Chris, which, obviously that's my name, so I made him the main character. The other guy, like, his assistant was Zygmunt, which I don't know how I came out. I think I just pulled that name out of thin air, and I just thought it was cool. I chose the name Jack because I had known somebody at the time who had that name, so I just kind of threw it in there. I also liked the name, so I just kind of chose names that I kind of just liked. And then I didn't really emphasize their personalities. What I found was that the plot, as I was hammering out the plot of the story, the characters' actions spoke for themselves in the plot. It was easier for me to put the plot out on a table and say, okay, here's all the events that happen. Now, how are my characters going to be changed and morphed through each of these events? And again, it's not always an easy thing to do because, as I said, this is a concept I said in the second episode of our podcast. I basically said, when you start the writing process, think of the beginning and think of the end. It's always good to think of where you want to go, where you are right now, which you know, and where you would like to go. And it's that middle area that's the gray area. But as you're writing the plot, it's best to think, I think Pete would agree, it's best to think of practical things. Unless your genre, and again, it depends on your genre, unless your genre is maybe like a fantasy or mine, like science fiction, although mine's not really entirely science fiction. Depending on your genre, you can go many different ways. If you're staying more factual, then you have to be careful what you say, and obviously, as another thing we said in the second episode, you have to be able to do your research. What you say plot-wise has to actually make some logical sense with what you're doing. If you're naming real locations and stuff, you got to be factual. And you got to be careful not to get information incorrect because you might come off as, ignorant to your readers who are investing time in your work. So all of those components go into it. And for me, with the science fiction, if you're looking to write fantasy kind of stuff like me, the best thing I can say is let your mind, think outside the box. Literally the possibilities are endless. I'd say start big. All right, start crazy. Why not? No one's going to see it. Start big. Start with crazy concepts. Then work your way down. The crazy concepts, when you're finished with your work, the crazy concepts can't be an overarching thing. Like, it's not like I read the book and I still see these crazy concepts. The great thing, again, as we said, writing is rewriting, so you're always going to be rewriting your script. Starting with crazy concepts, maybe, this character just destroys this thing with some superpower or something, maybe tone it down a little bit, make it a little bit more believable. Even though you're going a fantasy route, you still want the story to be believable, because that's what I believe resonates so much with people. If this is especially true with Harry Potter, if they see some truth in it, if it's not totally like bogus, like if all of a sudden the Earth just explodes, it's like, oh yeah, that's lovely. But if someone's doing an action through like a power or something that's more concentrated, that has a purpose behind it, then it's actually, it could make sense with the reader. They can say, oh, I get this, and I connect with this, and now I feel something about the characters, and I feel something for this magical power, and I want to get invested in it. And then you get people, this is far stretched, then you get people at conventions who dress up and say, hey, I've got this magic power. So I know that's far-fetched, but what I'm saying is there's a way you can model the plot of your story with these kind of quote-unquote crazy aspects, but you can still make it relatable to the reader. That's the main thing with the plot, and I think Pete would agree with this too. If you can make everything relatable, truthful in some parts, depending on what you're writing, but also relatable, you're really going to hit a key point with your reader, and that's the goal. Not only for, hitting it with your reader, but you also want to hit it with yourself, and you can step back and say, okay, I've got something really nice here, maybe I need to fine-tune this, maybe I need to rewrite this part, and that's the rewriting step. And if you've got your main concepts, those won't go away. If you've got the main concepts, if you've got them written down, then you'll excel from there. So I'll let Pete give his perspective on the question he just asked me.
Well, in addition to starting off big, also start off basic at the same time. Don't rush into a plot and say, oh, I'm going to have twists and twists and twists and turn and twist and twist. Like, just start off with a very, very basic narrative. Like, okay, good guy must stop bad guy, and then good guy meets up with this person helps them. The ultimate reward at the end of this is, freedom for everyone. The good guy beats the bad guy, and then the city is saved. The end. Like, something like that. Just start off like really basic, and then start weaving in details. Start weaving in, okay, maybe maybe the bad guy turned out to be good, and maybe there's an even worse guy, running the whole thing, or maybe it's like Liars Revealed story, where maybe like the good guy had to tell a lie in order to gain access to something, which soon which he has to pay for later on, and then soon enough he's got more than one enemy around. Start introducing new other characters and start intertwining all this crazy stuff. So, like I said, start off very basic. It's like I said in episode 2 with the equilibrium system, where it was the beginning equilibrium and the new equilibrium are the two parts that you're most interested in, which was what Chris was saying, which is what the beginning and the end. It's the breaking equilibrium, which is what has stopped the world from being at peace or from what it was before. And sometimes that happens during your book, sometimes that happens before it. And then the chain of events is what the main character has to do to get to the new equilibrium, which is what's going to happen after everything's over and done with. So by the end of the story, don't write a story that has no purpose. Don't write say if I was to take Chris's book, for example. Okay, Noah has to acquire all these power items in order to stop this war that was going on between the two power. I think that's right, and I don't really know. But it would really make no sense if Chris started it off the way he did. Noah finds the book that his father gave him. And he is transported into this whole different world, and then he does this whole story. He meets all these colorful characters, and he's going to stop it, and then the book ends. Obviously, there's no point in that because there's no new equilibrium. What's the new equilibrium? Okay, Noah's maybe a bit stronger, but that's not a satisfactory equilibrium for your reader, who they always believe in stuff like justice or another media theorist, Asperger, and hilarious name isn't Asperger, but basically, he came up with a list of 24. You can probably look it up online. Asaberger, Asaberger's list of 24, which is these 24 things are the reasons why people watch stuff. And so, like, some of them is like to see justice and to experience the beautiful, to to view things of a voodoo nature without any cause for without a worrying lack of safety, stuff like that. And so take stuff like that into mind, especially if you're in a screenplay where your audience will be watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that can really help you out in like plot-driven stuff. So if you were to do an intro, a main body, and a conclusion, make sure that there's actually stuff going to be happening in this, and don't just bore your reader with just nothing happening for the entire thing. You have to always have events happening.
Yeah. So I'll pose a question, and this is a question that Pete brought up. Well, first of all, before I pose the question, Pete, can you unplug your mic and then plug it back in? It was kind of lagging there for a minute. Those are technical difficulties. We can move past those. Hello, yes.
Any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Continuing.
So anyway, basically, this was a question that Pete was posed to me when we were thinking of ideas for episode 3. He said, "What is your favorite part of the plot of a story? The beginning, the middle, or the end?" And since Pete just explained his thoughts on plot in general, I will give my answer to this question. Basically, for me, and I said this to Pete earlier, that I believe in any story, and I'll give an example. In any story, the middle of the story is really my favorite, because a lot of the twists and turns, a lot of the dramatic scenes, a lot of the character development, the strenuous tasks, the anxiety, the depressing moods, all of this stuff is established in the middle. That gray area I was talking about when you sit down and write your story, it's all established in that key frame. And when I watch, a movie or TV show, I'm trying to think of a moment off of the top of my head. I can think of, this is just off the top of my head. I love the scene in Gladiator when I don't, this is obviously a spoiler for anyone who hasn't watched Gladiator, but
okay, spoiler alert for Gladiator. Okay.
But basically, this is when Commodus stabs Maximus in the back so that he can win the fight, and he's bleeding and he's hurt. It's dramatic. So after he does that, there's kind of like you see the mood kind of drop, like you feel this kind of drop in your heart, like, oh shit, like things are gonna happen. Then the next scene is them rising up into the battle arena with like this kind of like big orchestral like smashing just music, and then you have like a view of the entire stadium with flowers, and then you see you see his sister. It really gets you ready for the fight that's about to happen. It's other than them just entering like, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the emperor and the slave guy. It's like, other than doing that, like they took this dramatic tone, like, this is the final fight, like this is really it, and you feel it, and it's those moments that like make me, it kind of like, there's this exuberance inside of me, and ever since I was little, this is kind of embarrassing to be admitting on the podcast, but I have something where if I'm really excited about a story, I'll flit around the room, like I'll fucking fly to like one end of the room and then fly to the other end, flitting my arms and like just getting into it. Like it's almost like I'm possessed by like how just like gripping the story is, and I get into it and it gets into my head and I'm like, oh, that's so awesome, and oh, I just want I want to apply that. And so that's why the middle is the greatest part for me, because there's so much tension, and the ending, while I think it's important, more things are wrapped up in the ending, and Pete has told me his feelings, and he'll give you a different perspective of what he thinks of the ending. But I feel the ending is more of that resolution where you're kind of, all right, you're calming down. You're going to, it's almost like a climax chart. If you've seen a climax chart, it's like a hill. It starts at the bottom, it goes to the very top, which is the climax, like the point of all of the tension, and then it jumps back down. And it's almost like an upside down V climax chart. And the start is where it's beginning, and then the tension rises, and then there's a climax of the most tension, and then it drops down to this point where things are settling. And that settling period could be a big period for some people, where there's a big revelation that was kept hidden for most of the film or the movie or whatever it is you're watching. It could be like a dramatic twist, maybe something that you weren't expecting to happen that completely takes you by surprise. Or it could be it could be just a regular happily ever after ending, which work for some films, but I like the middle of the piece because that's where the story, the characters, and everything is flushed out to the greatest extent. The beginning and middle, no, the end and the beginning only serve to set up and resolve that conflict which I just explained. They both do great jobs. I mean, I've seen beginnings of films, I'm trying to think of an example where, it starts off very action-paced. It could be, I'll take a scene from
Inception? Perhaps?
Inception, yeah. Inception, of course you know I'd say that. Inception, where, spoiler alert again, but basically, you find out in that first intro scene that they're actually in a dream within a dream, and you think it's just, they're in this dream and they're in this other place, but then you realize, there's more going on here, and you're quickly introduced to the concept of the dream that Chris Nolan is trying to get across to you. And that's an example of a great...
how about another Chris Nolan film example could be The Dark Knight?
Oh, yes. How could I forget? The Dark
Knight.
Heist,
whatever.
The Dark Knight, if anyone doesn't know, The Dark Knight is my favorite, probably my favorite film action-wise, like story-wise of all time. I won't go the whole podcast talking about it, but it in terms of the middle, you want a story that has great execution in the middle. Oh my God, just unbelievable scenes, takes, build-ups, lead-ins. I won't go into it, but for people who have seen it, you obviously you know what I'm talking about. So that's what I like about the plot. And when you're applying it to your story, as I said, and I said this in the second episode, don't go into a story thinking, I have to have a twist here, and I have to have this here, and if I don't do that, my audience isn't going to like my work, and I'm going to be shunned, and my story's not going to be as great as anyone else's. No. Honestly, when you're brainstorming, think of things that seem rational. Don't go to the crazy extreme with some things. It's okay to think outside the box, like I was talking earlier, for broader concepts for the majority of your book, but if you're thinking of individual scenes or, maybe connecting scenes, try to make it rational. The turning points and the plot-driven stuff and the dramatic build, they'll come. They'll come as you think more and as you flush out your characters. And it's not something you can just say, I want this scene here and I've got to focus my story around this scene, because you'll set yourself up where you're trying to focus on these one scenes and the story kind of doesn't make sense because you're building up to a scene and then, you want this other scene and it might be off balance. And think of what Pete said about the equilibrium. You want an equilibrium throughout your book so your reader isn't overwhelmed when they read it, so there's a flow to it, so they can understand the way that the story is portrayed, and so that they can ultimately at the end connect with it, and so that they're a fan of yours and that they want to further invest their time in your writing. So Pete, what would you say is your favorite part of a plot, the beginning, the middle, or the ending?
Well, you pose a strong argument for the middle. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree and say that my personal favorite is the ending, and that's for multiple reasons. And of course, no love for the intro. We'll talk about that after we've got points across, because the intro can also be very important. But no, okay. So an ending is whenever everything is fleshed out. Like Chris was mentioning that most of the ends, the loose ends are tied up, and most of the unanswered questions are in fact answered, whether it be through a character's revelation or monologue, where they might be like, okay, I'm gonna tell you, it can be very blunt and just be like, okay, I'm gonna tell you some of this. My favorite author, Lois Sakar, is infamous for leaving questions unanswered on purpose to leave it up for audience interpretation. He would set up he would build a romance for the entire book, and then at the end, where you normally have the dramatic Hollywood kiss, he just says, oh well, I'm not gonna say to you what happens to me and the girl. And then that's it, and you never hear from him again. And while for some people it's infuriating, because you think, I've wasted all that time, get my hopes up on this couple, and now it's not even going to tell us whether they got together or not. It leaves a lot of food for thought for stuff like that. And then there's more than one reason as to why I like endings, and that's for twist endings. Now, I personally am a huge sucker for twist endings. And I'm an even bigger sucker, and get this, because some of your opinions on me might change on this, but I'm actually an even bigger sucker for sick, twisted endings.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen.
If I'm watching a thriller, and if there's a twist for it, and it turns out to be the most messed up thing ever, I will remember it for so long. And that's where you get the endings that really stick with you. When something that's ridiculous happens, and you're like, oh my gosh. And there are different versions of twist endings where it's like, where perhaps maybe it's the best twist ending, the one that gives you the most impact, is the ones where someone's been there for the whole time and you didn't even realize it, and then at the very end you realize, oh wait, that person was this person all along. And it was absolutely ridiculous because this is actually present in forms of written stuff that the two of us have read or have even made. In some cases, stuff like that does happen.
Yes.
And what happens is, and it just takes you by utter surprise because someone that you've been reading about for the entire book, maybe you're not too sure about the relevance of it, and then just finally at the very end, you realize that there's something completely different that you did not expect. You might have thought that maybe it was a bit different to go, maybe this guy was a bad guy, or maybe this guy was the guy, it was like your guy, but from another, like, dimension. Like, you know, sometimes it can be very different, and it depends on, like, the focus of the character. If the character's like an overseer, it can be just as eventful, but if they're on, like, the two, I call them the golden spots, which is the protagonist and the antagonist, if the twist ending relates to either one of them, then it's much, much, much better. You can have a twist ending where maybe, oh, you know, Old Man Jenkins, who was mentioned for 3 lines, oh, his son is the protagonist's brother. Okay, well, there may be a twist, but the audience wouldn't care. It's the twists which really, you know, relate to the story you've been telling and to the characters that you've created that really have, like, the most impact. And I'm going to give a few examples.
The Mist?
Of some twist endings, yes. I brought this example up to Chris before we started recording. The Mist is a thriller, and this is a big spoiler, by the way, because I'm pretty much just going to the end of the film.
Spoilers!
The Mist, yeah, huge spoilers. The Mist is basically a film about, it's like a psychological, like, horror type film. It's not really a horror, but it's kind of like, it's almost like a survival horror type thing. And basically you've got the mist outside, and there's, like, all these weird beings that are coming from it. And so, you follow the story of this man, his wife, and their young son. And so they have a whole load of survivors trapped in, like, a supermarket, I believe. And so, one by one, like, each of the survivors gets killed, except for an old couple that are, like, pretty wise in what they do. And then, like, at the very end, not the very end, but at the climax of the film, they get the car working and they drive off. However, the car runs out of gas, and so the dad has to do, like, something that the most people think, this would be sick enough if this was the ending, okay? It just, like, there's 3 different degrees of sickness in this ending, okay? It starts off sick, then it gets even sicker, and then it just gets to the, like, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it just got a lot worse. And so, like, those are the ones that, like, that's why I watched that film years ago, and I still remember this ending. Like, I can't even tell you the name of these characters, but I can tell you what happens exactly at the end, because it stuck out so much for me. Because it's the ending, the last thing you see is obviously going to stick in your mind the longest. And if it's something that memorable, then obviously it's good. But anyway, so the car stops and they're wondering what to do because they're surrounded by the mist and they know if they're going to get out or if they're going to stay there, they're going to die either way. So the dad figures, well, I better just end this right here, right now. You know, prevent the suffering. So he whips out like a flippin' pistol, okay, like an M9, okay. He whips it out from his car. And he has one round of bullets left, okay? So what he does is, each person, he points the gun at the person and shoots them. Every single person in his car. The first, the old two people, and the 2 old people, then his wife, then his son, which is, like, you know, obviously the most heartbreaking one. Then you think, okay, that's messed up, so now he's gonna kill himself. Because, you know, obviously he's not gonna live after just shooting all his family. He's already done, like, the worst thing anyone could ever do to themselves or their family. So he puts the gun in his mouth, pulls the trigger, and he runs out of ammo. And so, he's crying his eyes out, he's, like, furious that he just shot everyone and now he can't even end his own misery. Then he looks outside and he's like, wait a minute, I can still kill myself. So what he does is, he gets out of the car, he just stands there and he waits for the mist to take him. He hears a loud noise, he's like, okay, here they come. The loud noise turns out, he turns around, and the big noise turned out to be a tank. The US military arrived just in time, and they destroy the mist. They whip out their big weaponry, they open fire on everything, and so what happened, basically, was the father shot his own family, shot the 2 people, just seconds before the military came and rescued him. And so, and that's it ends. So, just, if you couldn't think that an ending could get any worse, shoots the family, couldn't kill himself, then the army arrived. I mean, he could have shot himself and that would have been it. I mean, that would have been a messed up enough ending. Like, oh my gosh, they all had killed each other. The people that we join for the entire journey. They come to an unsatisfactory end. But no, one of them survives. But does he want to survive after what he just did? He ended the lives of people that could have been saved. I mean, it's such an ending that really makes you think, and it's such like it's so disturbing that you just think, wow, like that. Like horror movies in general have pretty good like horrific endings to it, but that one just really stuck out for me, in my opinion. So
That's
those are the kind of endings I absolutely love, and those are just like endings like that are just absolutely phenomenal. I think the Mist started off as a book as well, so you can't just say that only works in like a media form. It also works in terms of books, if that's the ending that the book had as well. So sorry that I spoiled the Mist for all of you, but
Well,
I mean, but no, it's a very good film anyway.
We had a lot of movie kind of or entertainment references, and we warned spoilers, so it's not like people can smash their keyboards, and I'm sure it'll happen anyway. But so yeah, really really interesting. I guess that is a good valid point to like the ending. I never saw The Mist. I'll admit. I believe I saw a commercial for it. And I thought it was a generic film, but. I just, what was funny, while Pete was telling the story, I actually went on Wikipedia and looked up The Mist, and I saw what people thought of it. Like, it got okay reviews. It got like a 72% on Rotten Tomato and stuff. Like, the movie did okay, I think. But,
It was a generic movie, but then the ending was just the one that shocked everyone, to be honest.
Okay. Alright.
It's those kind of ones where you think that the heroes are going to survive, and then something bad happens. So, if I can just give one more, like, final quick one. Just
Sure.
here. This one I haven't even told you, okay?
Okay.
Have you ever seen the 2010 movie Buried with Ryan Reynolds?
I do not believe so.
Have you heard of it? Buried?
No.
Okay, well, hopefully you have no intention of reading it, but it's kind of an artsy movie, because the entire film, 93 minutes I believe it is, the last time I looked it up, 93 minutes, is basically Ryan Reynolds in a coffin for the entire movie, with a cell phone and a lighter and like a pen or whatever. Okay, so he has like a phone with him, and so he's able to contact the outside world. However, he has no idea where he is because he's buried flipping 6 feet under. So he has no idea what he's doing. Basically, the entire movie just him. Like, literally, he's the only character the only physical character in the film. Every other acting role was done through voice, through his phone. And so, basically, he does all this stuff, like, he's trying to contact, like, he discovers that he's been, like, held at ransom by some psychotic killer. He buried him, and now he has to like do a whole bunch of stuff, like tortures. It's kind of like Saw in a way, but it's not dumb. So what happened was, he had to do something. He had to cut off his finger and stuff, and make a video about it and send it to his family and stuff. It's pretty messed up. And then like he gets in contact with this agency, and they know that they're going to track him down. Now, spoiler alerts for this next part. So basically, the organization finds out where he is, and then the guy and Reynolds is kind of like, oh, what the heck is going on? Like. How do I know I can trust you guys? At this point, he's kind of gotten insane because he's been trapped down there for so long. And then to make matters worse, he's been like fumbling around so much in the coffin that he's caused a little hole, and sand is starting to come into his coffin. So he's pretty much almost going to drown at this rate if they don't save him fast. And so he asks the organization like to name one example as to who they saved, and the guy just like says Mark White like really quickly. Like probably just some dumb excuse, but basically, yeah, they say that they found him. And they start digging up where they presume him to be. And you don't see any of the digging, but you can hear like the shovels and stuff through his cell phone. At this point, like the sand is almost 3/4 of the way through Reynolds' body. So he's got very little time to survive because the hole's gone much bigger and sand is coming in at a ridiculous rate. And so they finally dig up the coffin. They open the coffin, and it turns out to be like none other than Mark White, the guy that they thought that they saved. And so after all that, the entire film turns out that they didn't even have the right body after all. And so Ryan Reynolds' character drowns in the sand, and it ends. That's the end of the film. So it's another one of those where it's like you think that there's hope. And he even rings his family before he does that. Like he rings his family and tells them that he's going to be okay and stuff. And then just for everything, like the story was looking so good, and then all of a sudden, boom, nope, they found the wrong location, and boom, he's gone.
Who was the
he's
Mark
dead.
White guy? Why were they digging up his thing? If I could just
that's one thing I didn't really understand, but like I think that could have been executed a bit better. That maybe they dug up like something maybe it was like a hoax that they dug up. But no, but I mean, yeah, the Mark White guy was just something that was very random. Like, oh, we found Mark White, and then it turns out because it was like I think it was like the name of something I found. I can
a
really
2010 Spanish-American psychological thriller film directed by Rodrigo Cortez. Wow,
yes,
what a
starring
Spanish
Ryan
name.
Reynolds
What a
in his
Spanish
first like non-comedic flipping role ever.
Huh.
His movies aren't that good. But that one he's pretty good in that film, I'll give him that. So yeah, like, once again, endings like that are very good. Like, once again, there was an okay film, but then the ending was the main one that just stuck out once again. So, if you have an ending like that, it's alright to have a blunt, like, okay, the bad guy's defeated, all good things happen, you know, it's alright, but then sometimes there are times when the audience wants more, and maybe it's like, oh, well, it was all well and good, but then, like, there's no better buzzkill than just having a really good story just to have a pretty crappy ending where it's just like, oh, the good guy's victorious at the end. And you see that mostly with, like, you know, like, family films and whatever.
Yep.
You mostly find stuff like that with, like, family films where they don't like pulling risks, and so they're like, oh, what we're gonna do is we're going to, you know, we're just gonna have a happy ending and nothing really that bad's gonna happen. Sure, they have some sort of twists in some cases, like maybe like the good character like gets rejected by like the people that he thought were his friends and he has to like overcome them. But then you know at the end, like the guy's gonna get the girl, the bad guy's gonna be defeated. But it's the stuff like that that kind of gets you a bit sick and tired of the stereotypical endings. But it's stuff like that, like the twists and stuff where not everything is what it seems and stuff that really like jerk people, that really like get people going. As long as it makes sense, don't have a twist ending that makes absolutely no sense. Don't be like, okay, you know, the guy is victorious, but then the guy that was helping him all along stabs him and kills him. The end. Like, okay, no motive, no explanation. Like, stuff like that can also just seem like very ignorant on your behalf, where it's like, oh, come on, like, we know you wanted to do a twist ending, but don't just pull something like out of your flipping backside, where it's like, oh, okay, this guy died for no reason, and you don't explain it at all. So be very careful of how you choose your ending. But if you can execute a really good ending, then it can really like make your writing production seems so much better. It can really add like a different twist to it.
Yeah.
So there's my huge rant on ending stuff.
Oh, that was good. That was good. You brought up two movies. One of them, actually, I didn't see either of them, but you brought up the second one, which I didn't know. So yeah, I'm not too sure I have much. I pretty much covered in my rant earlier. I covered most of my plot news. I don't know if there are any. I have one. I seem to always do this in these podcast episodes. I think of these ideas while we're talking, and it's a challenge I'd like to offer to the fans this time.
Ooh.
And but before I do that, do you have any? Is there anything else we need to discuss on plot or
The intro? I believe we really have stuff to talk about intros. Because the intro is the one part we kind of like. So I think we've talked a lot about endings and stuff and the main body and how you should like don't overwhelm your plot with loads of events and stuff. At the same time, don't just make it like a little cradle thing where like nothing happens. Like a load of movie reviewers say that sometimes films go like they're slow or they're really slow paced or they just get really boring towards the middle. So try and keep it somewhat eventful. Like always keep something interesting happening. Like I can't really say a specific example because it's your writing, so you're the one that's determining what's going to happen. But always keep something entertaining, whether it be like a character or whether it's like a plot device where maybe like something else is happening. It's alright to tell more than one story as well. We haven't really mentioned that, but like in the intros and stuff, it's alright to tell more than one. Louis Sachar tells 4 in wholes, I believe, 3 or 4. Yeah. He does 3 or 4 stories all at once.
Yeah, he also wrote The Wayside. I don't know if Pete's familiar with this. The Wayside Stories from Wayside Story. Oh, that was my childhood.
Sideways Stories from Wayside School.
Yes, reading those books was my childhood.
He told, I think, 29 stories.
Yes, and it was cool because at the end of the story, all the character stories kind of like interlaced. Like you got. What was the one story where like where the woman had like an ear on her head or something? Like it was really weird.
Like it was like a play on words.
This Nora or something. Like she was a new substitute teacher when Mrs. Jules went out with the baby and oh my god.
Louis Sachar is a master at number 1 intertwining stories and making them all link, and number 2 he's a master in play on words. For example, the final book in the Wayside Story, Wayside School gets a little stranger. I mean, it makes sense when you read it. Like, okay, Wayside School is a pretty ridiculous school. You know, it's built 30 stories up instead of 30 stories wide. So obviously it's going to be pretty weird. However, it's so obviously, it gets a little stranger, that makes sense. But once you discover the end of the book and why it's really called Gets a Little Stranger, you'd be like slapping yourself in the head thinking, oh, why didn't I? I mean, obviously Christmas I'm talking about. We're not going to spoil that one. It is a kid's book, but we don't care.
Go read it. Go read it. I don't care if you're 42. Go read the book.
Yeah, it's a really good, like, it's such a good ending to it. Like, you finally discover stuff about it, so. Like, stuff like that.
Isn't the cover kind of revealing of it too? Like what happened if I'm remembering correctly, the cover kind of gives...
it just, like, the covers normally just give, like, little ideas as to what each of the chapters were. Like, it's funny because Sakar also does, like, if you want to look at different ways of writing a story, Sakar is, like, one of the best at them. If you read any way, so like, he tells he writes so many different acting styles. There's the one whenever flipping, the story is told backwards. But if you remember that one, like, in the first book, a story is told backwards. Where, basically it's about prune juice and stuff, and it's about, like, the girl, like, was late for school because of her prune juice. It's a weird story. But then, also, like, and there's another one, I think, in book 3, whenever, it was, like, the pet day, and reading it for the first time, you're literally like, what the heck is going on? But then, at the very end, he shows, like, a chart showing, like, what each of the pet names were, and then you kind of read over again, you're like, it makes a bit more sense now. But yeah, like, there was some pretty advanced stuff for it. But yeah, like, feel free to tell more than one story if you can. Like, I think Chris is planning to do that in his second book, where he's going to be more than one story. As long as you keep it consistent, you keep it relevant. Don't tell, like, don't tell, like, a sci-fi and then a horror story, like, back and back.
This is Pete's chance to criticize my work.
No, but I don't mean that. I just don't mean, like, stuff like that is just, like, no. Like, at least have each of them correlate. And then, for the maximum impact, make both of them, like, relate to each other, like, towards the end, or even, like, some point during the middle, like, just, like, do something out there and your audience will love you for it.
So I have one final thing to say about the intro. A device that I typically use, and it can be used with argumentative writing as well. It is called the hook. Have you ever heard of this, Pete, before I go into...
I have not.
The hook is something, it's I don't know who came up, I don't know who first told me about it, but it's basically hooking your reader, luring them in. It could literally be in the first paragraph of your story, the prologue or chapter 1. Literally, the hook is what you use to capture the attention of your audience immediately, to pull them into the book. Because think about it, whoever's reading or watching your work, or, in whatever form you're doing it in, they have to be starting somewhere. So how are you going to get them into the world? How are you going to capture them so that then you can bring them through the middle and the end and all the other stuff we talked about? So I'm going to give you an example. A hook, when I kind of gave an example of a hook for Inception with the dream sequence, but for my book series, The Orb, if you're planning on, if you have I guess this is a spoiler if you don't want me to spoil what happens in the beginning of my book, but in The Orb, I hook the audience by starting with an action scene. The main character is running down the hall from something, and it's a bunch of paparazzi members, like people trying to take pictures of him and interview him, and you're like, wait a minute, why is a kid running down a hallway of a school with these guys running after him? Like, what's going on? Like, how does this relate, or all this other stuff? And you're like, you kind of want to know more. It's that thing that makes you want to know more. So I start literally the first sentence of the book is I ran down the hall, or I think it was like I walked down the hall. No, it was more like running, desperately trying to escape from. So I set a very kind of dramatic mood immediately, and it immediately brings the reader to a point of, I want to know what happens. And then you see, okay, what these guys are trying to do, and then from there, I've got you. Once I've hooked you in, you're in my story, and then it's my job to continue that with the middle and the rest of the story. So the hook is a device that you use that can basically bring your story forward. I know there are so many great examples. There is one story, I believe it was like a poem, and the poem starts with the words, what if? So it's kind of like, well, what if what? Like what is going to be that what if? So it's like it's like almost like rhetorical things. Sometimes authors do this, like they ask a question. The Percy Jackson book does this very well, the first one, The Lightning Thief. It says something like, if you're reading this book and you found out you're related to a Greek god, close this book right now and put it away and never read it again. So it's kind of like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, why would you write, it's kind of like that, why is the author saying this? Like, you want to know more. It's that device that makes you want to read further, and it's what will get your audience invested in your work. So I felt like if we're talking about plot, I absolutely had to talk about the hook. And
so, like, some other examples for stuff you could say is maybe, like, there is a book, I forget what it's called, but there's a book where you don't know it at the time, but the narrator of the entire book is Death himself. And basically, the very first few lines say, like, if you're reading this book, I just want you to know that you're going to die. Like, another, like, just, whoa, okay. Like, it's the most, like, ridiculous opening ever. And in terms of other, like, film stuff, one of the most iconic openings to every film ever is the opening to A Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick, where the very first shot is an extreme close-up of Malcolm McDowell, I think his name is. Malcolm McDowell's face as, like, his character. And it's one of the most iconic things. It's just so sudden. Like, it goes from black just straight to his face, and then it zooms out, and he's again like a ridiculous pose of his like henchman, and then that kind of actually geared up the rest of the film. And it is always good to have like unknown stuff, and also it's kind of like the flashback / fast forward sequence where it's kind of like you're starting off your book like with a scene that's like right in the middle or near the end of the entire book, and then it's a case of finding out what's going, like what happened to these characters that got them into this position. For example, and I have no shame in admitting this, Twilight does this.
Oh.
The book Twilight does this exactly. They do like it starts off with Bella like
You read
getting,
this?
like,
I didn't even know this.
I have read the intro to Twilight, yes.
Okay.
That's as far as I could take, and then I had to like jump out.
Well,
the window,
I have a funny story. If just for a moment, my friend a couple of summers ago gave me a challenge, and she's like, read Twilight and see how far you get. I ended up reading the first 3 books, then I started reading the 4th one, and I just couldn't take it.
Wait. You read the first 3 books?
Yes, of Twilight. Didn't watch the movies. I attempted with the first one, and it was like just so freaking dramatic and romantic. I had to put it down. So it was a challenge, but honestly, I wanted to see what all the hoopla was about. So many people were ranting and raving about this book, comparing it to Harry Potter. Now, I've read all 7 Harry Potters at the time, and I'm like, all right, I've got to at least see what people are raving so much about. And to be fair, the first book is written somewhat decently. However, I think the level to which she goes into the dramatic romantic stuff is kind of nauseating. But one smart thing that Stephenie Meyer does is that she markets her book. She markets it towards all of the all of the hormonal teenagers of America and all these other regions of the country, and it's basically a market ploy because so many people, teenagers, are going through relationships, girlfriends and boyfriends and breakups. It's a hot topic. People are always talking about, how do I get this person to go out with me? And this love story is kind of the pinnacle of that with these vampire powers. And it's smart. I have to give her credit because she marketed towards the correct audience. And she got all these freaking tenacious little fangirls to buy her book. And look how much money it made. And look at the franchise. So. And
I mean, to be fair to her as well, she did create like almost a new genre of film, of like romantic film. Whereas like romance with a different being, so you have like romance with, you can now have romance with like zombies, romance with the host is about a romance with aliens, and it's also written by Stephenie Meyer as well, so.
Oh god, yeah.
I mean, it's just like, she created this whole new like brand of romance films for like
necrophilia with like all these, oh my god.
So you can either like thank her or flipping disgrace her, but either way you have to give her credit for that as well. So yeah, so I just wanted to say that for another intro type of thing where sometimes, having a load of unknown stuff is really good because it gives your audience questions to ask. Be like, oh, what the heck just happened here? I want to read on and see what's happening, and then they'll actually be enthralled to read through the entire journey of your character and what goes on with them. As long as you keep them entertained, that is, and that was what Chris was saying about the main body and stuff and how you can do that. So that's pretty much it for intros and stuff. You can also start with just very basic, like, hi, my name is George, and this is my adventure. Like, you can do that if you want, but I mean...
Where's the hook in that? I was just bringing up that point about reeling your reader in. I mean... Okay.
Yeah, like, I'm gonna admit, like some stuff, like, Arby and the Chief, here's another example.
Oh, boy.
Season 5, or Season 6, whatever it is, the wedding one, the one with Trent Donovich and Claire, they started off, the very first part of that was, remember the flash forward
to the Deus Ex Machina. I don't know if you know that trick. It's called Deus Ex Machina, and it's translated as in the middle of, like starting in the middle of a story. Those are tactics and tricks, like I was saying earlier, that people can do, but... Yeah.
And you do stuff like that, yeah. But then, as for the rest of them, you kind of notice that most of the rest of the seasons is Arby and the Chief just kind of started from the beginning, which is where most stories should start from. But yeah, like sometimes they can be very. It depends on your genre. Once again, if you're writing like a rom-com or something, maybe it isn't really that good to start from the middle. But I mean,
just to clarify, Arby and the Chief is a web series, almost like an adult Toy Story, I would call it, and it's in script form, so Pete can relate to it. So that's why he brought it up, just for clarification.
It's a very big influence in my series writing. It's not a rip-off though. It's not a. I'm not using action figures to flip and film mine. Mine's going to be full 100% Halo gameplay, and it's going to be completely original characters and original story. Yeah. So don't worry, I haven't copied anything from it. But it's one of the things I always look to for how to really tell a story, because season 5 and 6 are just like some of like the best storytelling on like machinimas that you can ever see. To be honest, machinima uploads so much junk, but then that's kind of like the
Oh,
gold gems out of it. Yeah, that's right.
All right,
I went
I
there.
think we should stop.
Okay, yeah, moving on. Okay. Anyway,
I mean, I am
no, I just
partnered
mean like
with them.
I just mean like the general like gameplay and
I am
stuff. I mean
partnered
like
with them, so don't.
I mean like the storytelling stuff is like the storytelling stuff is good. The rest of it is kind of overdone.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
So, now that we've pretty much gone through most of our plot points, if Pete wants to bring up anything else, he can.
No, I
the
think
one.
for the most part.
You're good. Okay. So.
Well, actually, I think there's one more thing I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
Maybe think about how long you want your full-on plot to be.
That's a good length.
Yeah, yeah, there is a plot for. I mean, take Chris's book series for example.
And I think I know where he got the inspiration for this.
He has plots for. He has one ginormous plot for the entire book series of his. However, each one of his books has to have a different plot, almost a side plot, but it isn't really because it's actually the plot for the book that you're reading. But yeah, like you have like your full-on plot from your you have your like full-on plot from if it's gonna be like a little short plot, then okay, like I said, the original Equilibrium, like okay, good guy fights bad guy gets defeated at the end, like stuff like that is fine. However, if you want to take it to the next level and if you think you've got so much information, and maybe you're creating like a brand new world and brand new setting like what Chris is doing, then you might think it'd be worthy to write it as a part of a series and have like if you're writing like so many words, then maybe it's a case of expanding it into several different books, or in my case, several different episodes of series. So, like, for example, I could have, like, in season 3, I have pretty much everything that I know. I know exactly what's going to happen for the entire story, but it's just a factor of how many times should I split it. Like, at what point should I split each of the episodes? I'm probably going to write it as a huge thing from start to finish if I'm like making a movie. Except it isn't going to be a movie because words fun than that. And instead do it as part of episodes, so then like cut it at appropriate times during it, and then in that way I can give the audience like doses of stuff, as opposed to having like the world's biggest video that probably no one's gonna watch through. Same with your book. If you have like a 3,000 word book, I doubt anyone's gonna read through it.
Yeah, this was something Pete was telling me. I basically earlier today I went through the entire plot of my second book, just because we're writers and we like to talk about that kind of stuff, and Pete brought up the point that the second book, The Heir, which I'm like 100-something pages into writing, that it might be too long, that the length of the book might be too much for people to comprehend, and it's harder for me to judge if his opinion is correct and or valid, because I haven't written the full book. If I've written the full thing and I have a page count and a word count, and if I can compare it to the first one, then I'll be able to give a greater opinion. It's going to take time, obviously, for me to write it, and I do a little bit every day. However, I do agree that the book is going to be long. And I said this, like the book would be, if not 2.5 times the length of the first one. But it's worth it because, it's not regurgitating information. Everything that happens in the story has a purpose, and it's to bring you to this point. It's to bring you to this point of, the dark tone of the book and how it's molded. There's most of the book, the largest chunk of the book, takes place in this futuristic world, and that futuristic world is meant to mold the characters so that when they come out of the futuristic world, they're in this present, and now they have different mindsets now that they've been changed, quote unquote, by this future. That was the goal. And Pete had said, well, maybe you could split the book off at the future part and leave it off at a cliffhanger. And for me, it didn't really establish what I wanted to do, because it left too many unanswered questions for people who had gone to this future and seen this happening. And I felt that it wouldn't give the series enough due diligence for what I was trying to do, where the book leads into and stuff. So I'd say I'm going to obviously keep writing it and see where I'm at, but that was one point that Pete brought up to me, which I agree is valid, that I've always known in my head the second book was going to be way long. There may be ways to cut corners, of course, but, not cut plot, but, there might be ways to say things and maybe not the longest narration and stuff. But that's just a side thing I wanted to know, because we did have that discussion today, as just like I said about the myth.
Because we kind of like shared it, because I finished episode 3 of my series today.
Yes.
So now my prologue version of series 1 is now complete script wise. Now I just have to get the recordings up. Yep, thank you.
There you go.
Now I just have to get the software stuff, and I can actually start recording it and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to say that all of the voice actors, aka the three of my closest friends, all agreed that they will actually voice act in this. So the only thing I need now is the gaming capture software, and then that's us. Like, I'll pretty much have everything ready for it.
One of them's in
And
this
then-
chat session right now. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
Indeed, yes. So basically, yeah. So what's going to happen is I'm going to start recording that. Once I get the new capture device, I'll immediately get right to work in it. And I'm not too sure when I'm going to get it though, because well, I'll be able to save up money again starting next week. So on the bright side, it might come a bit earlier than expected. So we're going to see what happens anyway, and
Yes.
and then but at least now I know that all the scripts are done anyway. So
And as
we'll
for
see what
me,
happens.
As for me with my writing, I am at the point where the first book is pretty much like almost 100% done. There were some scenes that I was changing briefly. As I mentioned, I added 2 additional chapters to the intro to flush out Noah's San Francisco 2080 lifestyle, which I only gave like 3 chapters to explain before the plot really started to pick up. I felt like I didn't have enough time to establish the characters and who they were, so I gave 2 additional chapters to flush out the characters. I'm pleased to say that chapter 4 is just nearly completed. I only need to write like literally 1 to 2 more paragraphs and it will be completed. And then there was another scene in the middle of the book when they go to planet Raven, which is the first outer intergalactic planet. There were creatures that I had in the book which I later realized didn't really make sense for the rest of the book. Their presence kind of undermined some of the things that I was doing, and they had no relevance to other things that happened in the book. So I kind of took them out and replaced it with a different thing. But again, this is, as I've said 100 times, writing is rewriting, and it's okay to do things like that. And yes, my work is self-published, but it's not being published by a major entity. So I am able to go in and tweak anything I want. And that's the status with my stuff. Really, I mean, I'm looking forward to, obviously, when I go to college later this year, because any English professors which I've talked to could help me get my book to the next level. And it would be amazing. Pete and I do intend to still do the writer's block even when I go to college. It's a series we would like to continue. We love doing it so much. It helps us both to think critically and also excels our writing. We get to share what we do. We get to say our ups and downs with it. So when I'm in college, as I work with professors, and I believe I said this earlier, that I would give updates as to where the book was. You might even see stuff get published while we're doing the podcast. So, I mean, the future's unwritten, and it's the possibilities are endless. But I'm saying that there are many cool directions that the series can go, and you'll be able to see our works really get flushed out. Pete, as he just told you, will be getting his recording software to actually start making these machinimas. Now that his scripts are complete for 3 episodes, he's actually going to start learning how to record in the game, which would be Halo Reach. He's going to get his voice actors together. He's going to learn how to establish angles, and it's going to be an undertaking for him, I have to say. But I think he's ready for it, and I will be supplying my voice for one of the characters in the series, which I won't spoil. And I'm really looking forward to it. And we will definitely give that big promotion when we do the writer's block that follows that. And we'll definitely talk about it a little bit, maybe talk about how the process went. That'd be cool, Pete, if you could talk about how you felt, how the film set went with different people and stuff. How
maybe get some, like we were previously thinking about having someone else on, but unfortunately those plans didn't really go anywhere,
yes.
Unfortunately. We might have some other people on, you never know, but yeah, so that is, did you think that's about it?
That's about it. The one thing I wanted to post to the fans, if you have a scene, now I do these pump-up clips, and you saw the Half-Life one. Now we alternate between the clips. So last week I chose a clip from something I liked that had action, the tense, dramatic plot moment, which I was explaining earlier. Pete has his, which he did today. So each week we alternate. So next week I'm going to choose one, and I'm trying to make it as copyright-friendly as possible. So far, so good, knock on wood. Haven't had any problems with the last week's episode, so it went well. So I'm thinking that, we're going to continue to do the pump-up clips. We'll have our intro with the Gladiator music, and then we'll have that clip which leads you into the action. Then, all right, then you got your podcast. So the thing I wanted to offer to the fans, try sending us a clip. Could be a beginning of a plot. Choose a point in a plot in a story, from a movie, TV show, book, anything. Write it in the comments and say, all right, in this story, in the intro, in the middle, in the beginning, in the end, whatever, what was the point in the story you liked the most? Give us a scene from a story which you love the most, and I'm going to see if I have a reaction to it like you did. Like, I want to be wowed. Like, choose a film, choose something that blows my socks off my feet, and if I'm going to use a metaphorical phrase. And you can do the same to Pete. So you can direct it at both of us. We can both take a look at it, and we'll compare our reactions. We might even reveal some of our reactions on the next podcast episode. And before I go off, I would like to say that we are still doing the challenge that I offered last week, where Pete has to write a story in novel form and I have to write one in script form. Pete just got Microsoft Word, actually, for his computer.
Finally.
So, yeah, finally. So, he's going to be doing a whole bunch of different writing stuff. Now that he has 3 scripts completed, he's going to start, doing some other stuff aside from his script. So he'll take opportunity to do some stuff for that challenge, some stuff for another video we'll be making in the future, stuff like that. And so that will be coming up. Maybe, I'm not sure what episode we'd save it for. Maybe at like the end of April we might save that for something. We might actually reveal what we came up with for our writing stuff. So, okay, so that's been episode 3. Pete, any last words before I sign off?
I hope you enjoyed the plot of this podcast. I hope we didn't bore you too much in the middle. This is the end where we give all our dumb plugs and stuff and talk about us. The intro, I hope you enjoyed the intro with, Chris's ridiculous, flashy light intro and stuff. And then I hope you enjoyed the Half-Life 2 pump-up clip, which is one of my personal favorite battles in Half-Life, because it's just so darn epic. And also because, the game is just so darn epic because it's, the best game ever made. But aside from that, it's still very good. So I think next week will be characters, and it'll be about the 2 golden characters, antagonists and protagonists, as well as what's going on afterwards. So it'll also be the stock characters, and you'll have helpers and rewards and false heroes and stuff. We'll explain all the terminology. We'll explain what character traits they should have. But until then, I hope you've solidified what your story's going to be first of all, and then we'll start talking about the in-depth stuff for characters.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you for episode 4. Now, before I sign off, keep in mind that April, I believe, 15th, there is going to be no podcast episode of the Writer's Block, because the 14th, as I've plugged a couple of times, which I'll be making a vlog about, a very important video is coming out on April 14th, and we are taking that week off for the Writer's Block, unfortunately. So
2 weeks. Yeah, you have 2 weeks to write a good plot, and then
2 weeks.
Whenever we come back, you'll be ready for this.
And yes, we will be ready. So, all right, thank you for watching, and we will see you later. Peace out.